What's up, guys? UFC 308 just wrapped up, and the main card was insane. Prelims, hit and miss with some fights. Some were really good, some leg injuries and robbery wins and stuff like that, but the main card was super entertaining. From the main event knockout to the co-main event one-sided domination to Shara getting potential knockout of the year, or one of the best knockouts of the year for sure. I give the card a solid 8 out of 10. That was a really fun card, man. And we'll start with the main event. Ilia Topuria knocks out Max Holloway in the third round. First man to ever do it. Does Ilia Topuria hit harder than Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier and those guys? He blasted Max Holloway, rocked him one point of the fight, stunned him another time, and then dropped him for the knockout win. I mean, the way he dropped him, it looked like Max fell like a tree. It looked like he was like 80% knocked out at that point. And I don't know if it has something to do with the weight cut. I'm not going to make any excuses for every Ilia win like that, because there is the excuse about the Volkanovski win. Now people are going to make excuses about the Holloway win. You know, he was jumping up and down from featherweight to lightweight, which is a factor for sure. But he's fought at featherweight for his entire career, essentially. Now is the only time it affected him like that, when every single time he doesn't look good on the scales, he doesn't look good leading up to the fight, but he puts on performances against Arnold Allen and fights well against Yair Rodriguez and fights well against everybody besides the third Volkanovski fight. He did fight well against Ilia Topuria, but we can't make the excuses about the weight cut. He always looks that way. Every single time people have some kind of concern with the way the Holloway cuts weight, but he always performs. Ilia Topuria is just the man. He is one of the best fighters I've ever seen. I think he's the best boxer in UFC history. To be able to do that to Max Holloway and the way he was able to knock out Volkanovski using his footwork, right overhand interception and all that stuff, like, it's such high level boxing that you have to at least put him as one of the best boxers in UFC history, if not the best. And I think he's number 2 pound for pound in the world. I think he's right below Islam Makhachev. And the next opponent is going to be Aleksandar Volkanovski. I don't think Volk should be fighting him yet. I think Volk should fight another opponent. I do understand it's a money fight, right? He gets pay-per-view buys. It's his chance to get the belt back, but I think Ilia Topuria knocks out Volkanovski even worse than the first time. And Ilia is probably my favorite fighter right now. I mean, the way that he's able to build up hype for his fights, raise the stakes of his wins or losses, right? There's a lot said before his fights. He talked about how he's going to point at the ground 10 seconds into the fight, which he did. He invited Max Holloway to trade. Holloway didn't want to trade. He said he'll be the first one to knock out Holloway. He did that. He said that Holloway was going to become a fan of his after the fight. Not in a disrespectful way, because he said he's already a fan of Holloway, so he hoped that Holloway would be a fan of him as well. And Holloway kept saying, we're going to see what happens in the fight. Well, we saw what happened in the fight, and Ilia Topuria did exactly what he said he was going to do, except I think he predicted a first round knockout. But regardless, he knocked out Holloway and showed to be the better boxer of the two. He didn't even need to wrestle that much. He shot one takedown. He got Holloway to the ground, but briefly. And then for the rest of the fight, just kickbox with him. Leg kicks, blasted him with his hands. I don't know about Holloway's chin after that. Usually a fighter who has never been knocked out before, they get knocked out for the first time, their chin isn't usually the same. You know, we saw that with Chuck Liddell, but Chuck did get TKO'd in Pride against Quentin Jackson. But then when he got knocked out in the UFC, he was never the same. He was never able to take a shot the same way. But who knows? I mean, Kamaru Usman still has, at least it seems, a decent chin. And maybe Max Holloway is still going to be a very durable fighter after, but man, he's taken a lot of damage throughout his career. A lot of shots to the chin. Eventually, he was going to get knocked out. Like, you don't fight that way and get hit that many times to the head and just not get at least knocked down or hurt in a fight. And both of their theme songs coming out were so cool. Max Holloway came out to the Pain theme song from Naruto that mixed with his usual kickboxer song. And Ilia Topuria might have the best theme song in the sport. It's so legendary, man. When those chords start playing from the guitar, you already know what time it is. Ilia Topuria is about to get a knockout. I think this is a future Hall of Famer. It might go down as one of the greatest fighters of all time. Him and Islam Makhachev are the two fighters that I look at and I'm like, okay, these guys are going to go down as some of the all-time greats of the sport. Maybe Alex Pereira as well, but Islam and Ilia for sure. They're so good, man. And as for their next fights, it looks like Ilia is going to be fighting Volk, and for Holloway, he should go up to lightweight. I like him at lightweight. He has more power. Like, he was hitting Ilia, who does have a decent chin, but he wasn't really able to hurt him at all. He left like a bruise under the eye, but that was pretty much it. Never like stunned him or anything like that. Never rocked him. I think Max Holloway, because of the power that he has at lightweight, he is a more effective fighter in that weight class. And I think for his next fight, maybe the winner of Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira, that would be pretty fun. And then we go to the co-main event. Khamzat Chimaev runs right through Robert Whittaker in the first round. Bro, Khamzat is just that good. He's just that good. We were talking about his cardio. We were talking about 5 rounds and all that stuff. Whittaker couldn't even get out of the first round with him. Do you know how insane that is? It is so hard to get out of the first round with this guy. He's too strong. He's too fast. His grappling is too high level. He's got punching power. He's a huge guy for the weight class. Well, he was huge for welterweight. He's big for middleweight. And he dislocated Whittaker's jaw with a neck crank. Like, the squeeze on that must have been absolutely insane because Whittaker tapped immediately when the neck crank got applied on his jaw. Like, I don't know if he kept his mouth open. Maybe that caused it to be dislocated so quickly like that, but Whittaker did show good grappling defense. He was able to scramble out of some positions. He was eventually able to get back up to his feet, which is something a lot of fighters aren't able to do against Khamzat, but I think we're looking at a better version of Khamzat Chimaev than we've ever seen before. I mean, he talked about the difference in his training. He's also different with his personality, with his demeanor. He's a lot calmer, right? He's Khamzat Chimaev now, and he seems to be very, very effective on the ground still, and maybe even more so if he does have next level cardio, if he's stronger than ever before, because that training camp wasn't just about cardio. He probably got physically stronger during that training camp as well, bringing all those different coaches and different athletes to train with in a more methodical, professional way, taking his game to a whole new level. But Khamzat wasn't really tested by Whittaker that much, except for some positions on the ground. And Whittaker, he backed up right into the fence, or close enough to the fence where Khamzat was able to shoot a takedown on him and push him up against the fence, when lateral movement is the way to get away from those kind of takedowns. But it was the fake uppercut from Khamzat that got Whittaker to move back like that, right? Whittaker is a more linear kind of fighter with that karate stance. So amazing win from Khamzat Chimaev. But hopefully Khamzat stays active, or at least has the mentality to stay active, whether he waits out for a title shot or not. Hopefully afterward, he starts fighting a lot more frequently like he used to, because the guy's missing a bunch of his prime. He's like, what, 30 years old now? He's in the prime of his fighting career, and fighting once to twice a year is just not it, I think, for Khamzat. I don't even think he wants to fight that infrequently. I think he wants to get in there more often. Amazing win for Khamzat Chimaev. His next fight should be a title shot, and then for Robert Whittaker, I'd like to see him fight Imavov or Boralo, one of them two. Magomed Ankalaev gets the decision win against Aleksandar Rakic. Good performance, the usual southpaw left hands, landing on the opposite stance fighter, and Ankalaev was only getting better throughout the fight. He was very fast to land those left hands. I thought they would be kind of equivalent in speed, but Rakic was definitely a bit slower than Ankalaev was. I had a 1-1 going into the third round, and Rakic's coaches completely messed him up. They told Rakic between the second and third rounds that he was winning the fight. What does Rakic do in this? What does Rakic do in the third round? He shoots a takedown, thinking that he was ahead when he really needed a knockout, because the fight could have been 2-0 for Ankalaev going to the third. I had a 1-1 going into the third round, but I could see it 2-0, 2-0 for Ankalaev. Rakic needs to fire his coaches or something. They completely threw him off. Like, there was no level of urgency at all because of Rakic's coaches. They should have been telling him, yo, you're losing this fight. You need a knockout. You came out here to prove that you're better than Ankalaev. You came out to prove that you deserve a title shot. This is your opportunity. Get out there and get this, you know? But instead they told him, nah, you're winning the fight. He's gonna try to knock you out. Rakic shoots a takedown, doesn't really do anything, doesn't try to get a knockout. He had less urgency in the third round than he did in the first and second. That's crazy, after he was arguably losing the fight. And in the beginning of the fight, he was throwing out a lot of high kicks. This is similar to what Volkanovski was doing to Ilia Topuria when they fought each other. I thought the high kick should have been kind of like the trump card in a way, right? Don't show your hand before throwing out your big technique to win the fight. He came out there instantly throwing out head kicks, when I think the better game plan would have probably been throw out light kicks and body kicks and condition for head kicks later, because the head kicks were getting close, but I think they would have been more effective for Rakic if he set him up after his light kicks and body kicks. This is similar with Volkanovski versus Topuria. Volk came out there with a lot of head kicks right in the beginning before setting them up, right? If you don't set up the high kicks and you're throwing them early, most of the time the opponent is going to defend those high kicks for the entire fight. But good performance from Magomed Ankalaev. He should get a title shot now. He should be fighting Alex Pereira, and he called him out in English too. He's like, Alex, stop running away. That's the next title fight in the light heavyweight division, and I think Alex beats him. If he fights like that against Alex Pereira, he's going to get knocked out most likely. He needs to mix in takedowns. All of these guys at light heavyweight need to mix in takedowns, especially someone like Ankalaev, who is one of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestler in the weight class. If he doesn't mix in takedowns, the weight class is cooked. And as for Aleksandar Rakic versus Roundtree would be an insanely good fight. Lerone Murphy defeats Dan Ige by decision, 29-28 across the scorecards, which I agree as well. It was a good fight, competitive, but what happened to Dan Ige's cardio? He gassed out after one round. This is the same guy who went 5 rounds at a similar pace against the Korean Zombie and Kelvin Kattar. It's been 3 rounds many times throughout his career, and I've never seen him gas out like that before. He had to have been like sick or injured going into the fight. I mean, he stepped off the couch to fight Diego Lopez and showed better cardio at a faster pace of a fight. He did take some body shots, so maybe that has something to do with it, but that early, like gassed after one round. I know he started the round pretty quickly with the takedown and put the pressure on Lerone Murphy, but it doesn't make sense to gas out that quickly. He did drop Lerone Murphy in the first round. He's so good in the pocket. From the southpaw stance, moved back just slightly, left hook counter. But for the rest of the fight, Murphy did a really good job of point fighting, landing shots from distance, getting some takedowns, really good top transitions. But there were a few moments where Dan Ige was able to reverse him, but just didn't seem to have the cardio to do anything with it. If he had a little bit more in the gas tank, I think he could have won that fight, because the third round was up for grabs for most of it. When he had the crucifix position, I mean, dude, he could land a few quick elbows in there. From the half guard, he could have landed some shots. Like, as someone who picked Dan Ige to win the fight and expect him to fight similar to his last fights, it was kind of frustrating to watch that fight, not gonna lie. But it's a good win for Murphy. He just beat the number 14 ranked featherweight contender. Maybe Kelvin Kattar should be his next fight. And as for Dan Ige, maybe a non-ranked opponent like John Silva would be an interesting one. Give John Silva an opportunity to fight a top 15 opponent. Dan Ige versus John Silva would be an excellent fight on any card. That would be an amazing fight, man. A bullet knocks out Armen Petrosyan with one of the greatest knockouts we've ever seen in the sport. Second round, double spinning back fist. First, he fakes the side kick to the body that he was throwing the whole fight. He got Armen Petrosyan to lift his knee in order to block the side kick, causing him to plant in stance. Then the first back fist gets blocked, returned with the other, as Petrosyan was trying to counter the first back fist, not expecting a second one. That's like one of those knockouts they're going to be playing for many, many years. And Shara Bullet is just gathering more fans with his performances. The guy is so fun to watch. Like a real life video game character. He looks like some kind of movie villain. He fights like some kind of Tekken character or Street Fighter character and just gets these crazy knockouts, amazing performances, throwing out side kicks, spinning attacks. His movement is so good. Technical with his stand-up, landing counter left hooks as Armen Petrosyan was landing his 1-2 combinations and was doing a really good job whenever Shara was backing up in the beginning of the fight, but then Shara's coaches told him, stop backing up, fight him in the center of the cage, and that was working beautifully for Shara, throwing out all different kind of combinations to the body and to the head, and even was trying to get him with a low feint left high kick. He was faking that a few times in the fight, but sometimes his leg didn't get all the way up there. It looked like sometimes he might have been targeting the body instead of the head, but a very good sequence there, and Armen was very effective with the leg kicks. The guy landed over 40 leg kicks by the time the second round was like a minute in. It was insane. And there were a lot of low blows because of that, which is understandable. When you throw what it looked like 100 leg kicks in the fight, some of them are probably going to be a low blow, even though still those are foul strikes regardless. And for a few of those, the referee didn't even step in when Shara got low blowed. He just continued to fight and then eventually got that crazy knockout. But I really love some of the combos he was throwing, like the right straight to the body, left hook up top as he was fading away, mixing up his kicks with his combos. Just an excellent striking match between two very, very good strikers. And after that performance, you have to give Shara Bullet a top 15 opponent. He's 5-0 in the UFC. He's been competing very often. And I would love to see him fight maybe Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira's coming off a loss against Anthony Hernandez. He's ranked number 14. I think that'd be a great fight to watch. Michel is very explosive in the first round, then he fades. Shara Bullet, he's at his weakest in the first round, and then he starts to get his reads later in the fight, kind of like Peter Yan in a way. So early in the fight, that's when Michel has the best chance of winning, but after the first round, I think Shara Bullet starts to take over the fight and then eventually knocks him out. Right, Shara Bullet has way more power than Anthony Hernandez. So I'd love to see Shara Bullet versus Michel Pereira in their next fight. Ibo Aslan literally just walked right through Rafael. Bro didn't even fight. He threw one leg kick and the fight was over. And the exact thing I was saying in my prediction video that Rafael cannot do. Don't be too patient and don't be inactive in the fight. It's exactly what he did. Because Ibo Aslan will just throw hands at you until he knocks you out. In the light heavyweight division, with small gloves, you can't be covering up against the fence. A lot of those shots were getting through. A lot of them were rocking Rafael, and I saw a lot of people saying that it was an early stoppage. I mean, we don't want to see the guy get knocked out, right? He had so many moments to throw some punch or move out of there, and he just wasn't. He had like slight movements left and right, but that wasn't enough to get away from Ibo Aslan. I thought it was a pretty good stoppage, and it's crazy because Rafael said he was going to quit MMA when he got an offer to fight for $79. Well, here he gets way more money, even though it's probably like, $10K or whatever it is, 10 to 20K. I don't know how much he's getting paid for that fight, but it's going to be much more than $79. He comes out there and fights like that. He didn't fight. He didn't really fight. He threw one leg kick, covered up, got finished, and that was it. I expected a lot more urgency from a fighter that was about to quit MMA because he was going to get paid $79. He's getting paid thousands of dollars on the grand stage of the UFC and doesn't do anything in the fight. There are so many amateur fighters that would have went in there and done much more. Showed much more urgency, showed way more aggression, or at least the will to fight back against Ilia Topuria. But man, I really wanted that to be a better fight than it was. But Ilia Topuria just proves to be too powerful, and Rafael probably was more rocked than we thought he was, and maybe he couldn't fight back, but there were many moments where he was guarding up on the punches. They weren't getting through, and he still didn't even try to throw anything back. Right? Some fighters, as soon as they get hit by some big punch, they don't fight back. But then you got guys like Whittaker who will fight back. It is what it is, I guess. But great win for Ilia Topuria, very easy. Would love to see him get right back in there. Another big fight for him, both for him and Jeff Neal. Sure, Jeff Neal defeats RDA by a TKO due to an injury, but Jeff Neal was looking really good before it. Sometimes you could tell while watching a fight who is going to win, and it looked like Jeff Neal was the better fighter in there. RDA should probably retire. Injuries get worse and more frequent as they age, and if it's an ACL tear, RDA is probably not going to be fighting for a very long time. But both guys came out there throwing leg kicks at each other. Jeff Neal eventually was able to slightly step to the right side to line up his 1-2, but he didn't go forward with the 2. He didn't go forward with the left straight. He covered distance with the jab and then planted on his straight. You can tell he was confident that shot was going to land. And as he said, he doesn't normally fight southpaw fighters, so to line up a shot like that probably felt really good for Jeff Neal, man. Most of his opponents are orthodox fighters, and the left straight is a little bit easier to land on those guys, but landing that so early against a southpaw and dropping him after not being able to do that against most of his opponents is a very good thing and a confidence booster for Jeff Neal moving forward. I mean, the guy barely was even sweating out there, and I'd love to see him get another fight right back in there, man. It doesn't look like he got injured. He looked in good shape, didn't take much damage, and I think a good fight for him would be Gilbert Burns. He's ranked number 10 and Burns is number 8. That'd be a great fight next. And as for RDA, man, I was hoping maybe he could fight Conor McGregor, finally get that fight put together, as both of them seem to be out of their prime. If RDA has an ACL tear, I don't think that fight happens, so I would love to see RDA retire. Mateusz Rebecki pulled it off against Whittaker by a split decision. I thought he won the fight. I thought he won the first round and the third round, landing the bigger shots overall. Third round was very competitive though, because Earlby was landing some big shots himself, reversed on top, landed big ground and pound as well, but he did get dropped. It nearly finished with ground and pound in that same round, so that trumps and gets him the win of the fight. It was mainly the left overhand, right? He was throwing the left overhand for most of his meaningful attacks, whereas Earlby was throwing elbows, right straight that always got right over the head of Rebecki, because Rebecki constantly was ducking his head and slipping on the outside of it. Eventually, Earlby switched it up to uppercuts, and I thought that head kicks and body kicks would have been a very good adjustment for Earlby in the fight because of how much Rebecki was leaning and he was conditioned on evading the right straight. So if Earlby threw the right straight, faked it, and then came up with the high kick, I think that would have worked against Rebecki and probably would have gotten a knockout, Leon Edwards or Justin Gaethje style. But he wanted to box for the most part, and even just body kicks, because Rebecki doesn't have great cardio, shown in the Diego Ferreira fight, and there wasn't a lot of body work from Earlby, mainly just punches to the head, a few punches to the body, but he was circling into the left hand of Rebecki multiple times throughout the fight, and eventually did get his eye shattered in the first round. He was throwing, I think, a left elbow at the same time. Rebecki's fist came right into the eye, which hurt Earlby's ability to see the punch as the fight was moving forward. I mean, what an insane fight, man. Both guys got badly damaged, huge amount of heart from especially Earlby, but both fighters. I thought he was finished in the third round. When he got dropped by the left overhand, it looked like he was on the way to get TKO'd, but he was able to survive. I mean, he was literally standing up while getting punched in the face, eating hooks to the jaw, and he's just standing up, not really defending himself. The heart on that guy is absolutely insane. And then after the fight, he's like, let's go one more round. Mitzbek Earlby is special. He's going to be very, very good in the future. Much better than he is now, right? He's good already, but I think he will be a ranked fighter in the future, as will Rebecki. And I do think if he just mixed in a lot more kicks, he could have won that fight, in my opinion. But he was playing Rebecki's game a bit and not using his range as much, right? He had decent jabs, but the kicks would have been the main weapon to not only keep Rebecki at bay, but also target the body and head against Rebecki's one-dimensional defense, right? He was kind of just doing the same thing to defend the punches. Earlby was throwing mostly of the same kind of punches throughout the whole fight. His main thing, he was trying to line up that right straight over and over again. It got very close. You can see the amount of power he throws with it, but that could have set up the head kick, which would have been beautiful work from Mitzebek roll by. What about Abus Magomedov getting a submission win in the third round against Bruno Ferreira? It was a great fight after the first round. The first round was more of a feeling out process for both of them. Abus landing a lot of body kicks and leg kicks. And Ferreira wasn't really doing much. He landed like 2 strikes, right? 2 significant strikes in the first round. Then in the second round, his coaches told him to be more aggressive, be the first one in the exchanges, and he was. Landing some big shots, big left hands, dropping Abus with a jab. He looked to block Abus' counter shot, dropped him with a jab, or rocked him at least. That solidified him winning the second round. So it was 1-1 going into the third. But the wrestling in the second round from Abus was a little too strong for Ferreira to defend against, and it showed in the third round as well. That was the adjustment from Abus Magomedov, showing his fight IQ to change up his striking style into a wrestling style, knowing that his opponent is getting the better of him in some of these exchanges. He showed that he was the better mixed martial artist in the fight. And I thought Bruno Ferreira sold the first takedown because he threw the spinning back elbow, got taken down off of that, which is amazing timing from Abus. And many times throughout the fight, he was getting the back, he was getting full mount. Ferreira was landing back of the head shots with his elbows, but still able to get back up to his feet. And then got double leg. That was such a great takedown from Abus. It reminded me of like a GSP type of takedown. Blast double leg, got him to the ground, arm triangled him, finished him by submission. His cardio is getting better. He looked in much better physical shape. Still getting tired. The second round was a crazy pace, but getting tired in the third round like that is not great, especially if he's going to be a top contender fighting championship fights or main events, which they're going to be 5 rounds, right? Not everybody's going to get finished that easily. If he fights Sean Strickland again, or if he fights Adesanya, or any of the top contenders of the middleweight division, they're not going to go away that easily. Most of them are going to get into the 4th and 5th rounds. And Abus has to get his cardio ready to go into the championship round. So great performance from Abus. Also great performance from Bruno Ferreira. But what do you do with Abus? Because he doesn't have a lot of fights in the UFC. He's 3-2, right? He does have 2 losses, but they're against some of the best middleweights in the world. He lost to Sean Strickland and Caio Borralho, who in my opinion are championship level fighters, both of them. Obviously Strickland is. I think Borralho is that good as well. So those losses aren't really anything for Abus. Those are good fights for him to get better from. So maybe you give him a top 15 opponent, or actually not yet. Give him another non-ranked fighter, because the Bruno fight was close. If he went out there and dominated Bruno, then you give him a top 15 opponent. But because it was competitive until the submission win, I think you give him another non-ranked fighter, maybe like Adolfo Vieira or something like that. Kennedy Nzechukwu defeats Chris Barnett by a TKO in the first round. This was an unsatisfying win. Barnett injured himself. Seemed like when he threw the wheel kick. The injury also could have came from the beginning of the fight, where Chris Barnett jumped when they announced his name. He jumped up and then he landed weird. Then the spinning kick probably made it even worse. And credit to Kennedy for evading the kick, but an injury coming off of that is not great, for Chris Barnett, obviously, for the fans. Even Kennedy doesn't want to win like that. But injuries are a part of the game. And Kennedy was looking pretty good out there. He was landing a lot of front kicks to the body, some 1-2s. He got hit by some counter right hooks from Chris Barnett. It was by no stretch of the imagination a done fight. It wasn't like Kennedy was dominating. The fight was still kind of commencing. It was still a lot to happen in the fight, and the injury just got worse and worse throughout the fight, and Chris Barnett couldn't fight anymore, right? He collapsed on himself when he got barraged on by Kennedy. And man, Barnett was looking a lot better than a 5.5 to 1 underdog or whatever. I thought he had a real good shot at winning the fight eventually, right? Landing some big shot. I don't know if it was his ACL or hamstring, because he was holding the back of his leg. Man, I feel for Chris Barnett with everything coming into the fight with his mother and stuff, and then for his fight to end like that is very frustrating. Farid Basharat defeats Victor Hugo by a decision. This was such an impressive fight because Basharat weighed in as a bantamweight essentially, right? 137 pounds. Victor Hugo was a featherweight in the fight, 145.5 pounds. And he just outskilled him. Even took him to the ground, got his back in the third round. What in the TJ Dillashaw was that striking? I mean, very high level striking from Basharat. Moving out there like he was TJ Dillashaw. Amazing footwork. Great shot placement, beautiful counter right hands, and an excellent in and out jab. You see the footwork, him bouncing out and coming in with the jab and stuff, and he tried to get that highlight reel knockout with the spinning hook kicks, but fell a little short on both of them. But all respect to Farid Bashar for taking up the fight against a much bigger opponent, and even though he got hit by some big shots, the spinning back elbow and the other clean left hook, he was able to tough his way through both of those shots, stay composed, stay technical, and beat the giant. What a performance by Farid Bashar, man. And if they were in the same weight class, or they fought in the same weight class, Farid would have made that a lot easier. I think the weight gain for Hugo also also gave him a better chin because some of those right hands were landing so clean. He didn't drain himself at all to make 135 pounds. But if he did, right, if they were in the same weight class in the fight, I don't think he would have ate all those shots like that because those right hands were landing way too clean. And Hugo didn't look like he got rocked by most of those. So excellent performance by Farid Basharat. And hopefully he gets a top 15 opponent next. He's been looking amazing in all of his fights. Very skilled fighter. Great cardio. Good wrestling. Good boxing. Good kickboxing. Amazing footwork. Like very high level stuff. And I think his next opponent, being a top 15 fighter, should be able to test his overall skill set. And I think he will adjust to the better competition as well. And I think they should run back the Montel Jackson fight. They were supposed to fight each other before, but now is the perfect time to have them matched up against each other. Then we go to Nardiev defeating Bruno Silva by decision. Silva just doesn't have it anymore. He's not the same fighter. He's just on a decline ever since the Alex loss, and Nardiev just wanted it more. He was much more aggressive with his hands. He was a lot more aggressive with his takedowns, going for the guillotines, and Bruno Silva's doing the whole thing where he would miss a kick and then rotate slowly. Bruno Silva used to be so good. Now it just seems like he doesn't even want to fight anymore. So a good win for Nardiev, and then we go to Rinat Fakhretdinov defeating Carlos Leal by decision. A lot of people had it for Leal, and it's crazy because there was a scorecard that was a 30-27 for Rinat. Leal had the biggest shots of the fight. He landed the biggest shots. Like, okay, he's got back acne and he's insanely muscular. He's huge for the weight class, or at least muscle bound. He's bald. He's explosive. Like, okay, maybe he's not natty. Maybe. Luis J. Gomez definitely started taking some of them roids. No, I'm kidding. But he landed the bigger shots. That's all it was. Fakhretdinov was throwing some of those haymakers like he usually throws, and they weren't as effective. He got some takedowns, which were pretty decent. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy the fights. Leave in the comments below what were your favorite moments of the card. There were a lot of them. What was the best finish, and who should these fighters fight next?